The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Game Toppers, belated retrospectives, and listeners like you.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the Gateway City, St. Louis, Missouri, it's the Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board, card, and probably not role-playing games. Today, the Dukes belatedly break down their top game of 2021, most surprising game of 2021, most enduring game from 2021, best gaming experience from 2021, most played game of 2021, and the biggest gaming change in their lives from 2021. Then they bring on Jamey Stegmaier from Stonemaier Games to give an inside look at how the industry has changed from a publisher's point of view. And now, the Dukes of Dice.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Sean.
And Alex.
And you're joining us for episode 266. At least it was in 2020. That name suggestion, thanks to Matthew S. over from our guild. Makes sense because of our 2021 retrospective. And at least it was in 2020. Right, Alex?
I would say for me, 2020 was a year I got married in and was a bizarre year and challenging year. 2021, though, I would say was an improvement, even though it had its own blend of frustrations to it.
Sure.
2021, I got a new job, bought a house, and had a baby all in the same year.
Okay. Sounds like some discussion for the retrospective.
What? Oh, you mean for that section of the show where we take a look back at the year that was?
Yeah.
And not this opening banter section?
No, I was just looking for a little something light from you. Something snappy.
I'm not playing your game, Sean. I'm going rogue. I'm going off script here.
Perfect. Well, anyway, I'll just break in and cut you off then. We get help naming all of our episodes from our Dukes of Dice guild number 2008, over on BoardGameGeek.com, and we've got some runners up that we'll give you at the end of the episode. All right. Anything non-retrospective, Alex, before we jump into talking about games?
Not for me, though. I think is this thing that's happening in your world something that's announceable or that you can kind of talk through to give folks a window in, or not really?
Yeah, no, it's fine. But it also I guess it's technically happening now, so maybe it's not retrospective. Yeah, we're expanding the office at work, my law firm. We just leased the unit next to us, which is basically doubling our size. We're going to be hiring at least one new attorney, possibly a second in a couple months. And this all came together like in the last week and a half, like literally the last week and a half. Wasn't planned, but basically the unit next to us was going to sublease to somebody else to finish out their last year and a half of their 4-year lease. And I was like, oh my goodness, I can't let that happen because we need to expand soon. And so, yeah, we made it happen. It's very stressful. If you recall, I was supposed to have the week after Christmas off. I mostly did, except I spent about 20 hours working for this one quasi-corporate client because there were some major issues that had to be dealt with. So that was unfortunate. And then this last week has been super busy because I've got we've got contractors coming out, we're dealing with the building, all this stuff, plus my normal caseload. Yesterday, Friday, because we're recording late, Friday, I was in the office a little before 5:30, and I left around 7 p.m. So it was a day. It was a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's you're always some kind of ebb and flow of busy. There's like a baseline level of Sean busy, and then it seems like in the last week or so, it's just kind of gone into the overdrive, over the top, unbelievably busy, and it may stay there for a while. It feels like.
Well, here's what I would say: from November and December was probably okay. So when I first took over the business, the first month I took over the business, which is when not only did I push out the former owner, so to speak. But the other attorney who had been working for us, she had left the month before, and I had like a double caseload. That like month and a half was one of the busiest I've ever been. But November, December, and even now has like I can't imagine. Like it's been crazy. December we were working so hard just so we could get the week off. And yeah. So this is the busiest. Like I feel like every week since the start of November has been the new busiest week of work. And there's no slowing down. On top of it, I think I've said before, like January, February are some of the busiest times for filing new divorce and custody cases because people are just trying to get through the holidays. And so I've increased our ad revenue right now. And so I have, just to give you an example, I have 5 consultations set for Tuesday. And normally it's like max 2 per day, if that. So I just told my assistant and Mariah, who does our scheduling, I said, okay, I'm going to start taking consults after hours as well. And I can do 2 Saturday mornings as well. So.
Oh boy.
This is stuff, Alex. This is stuff.
Man, wow. All right. I don't have much other comment than that, but it sounds both fun and not fun, right? The opposite of that would be bad too, if it was 0 consults across the board.
Sure. Well, and that's the thing is we have to kind of work ourselves up to a critical mass of new clients so that we have work for the new attorney to do.
Right.
So, yep. Hey, how about some board games?
Okay, we'll dive in. We both have some new plays here, which is great. First one I'll talk about is a game that had gotten a lot of praise in 2021 from folks in the gaming groups out here. It's a Capstone game, but kind of from the lighter end. This is the Capstone family line of games. And it's Juicy Fruits, which, if I'm not mistaken, is based in some form or fashion off of an app. If it isn't, it feels like an app. Have you played this one yet, Sean?
Yeah,
maybe you've talked about it. I thought you talked it on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you would think that I would have played it had I talked about it on the show.
You would hope, yeah.
Yeah.
For folks who don't know, and I'll keep this one brief, this game's designed by Christian Store. This is a slide puzzle, efficiency puzzle kind of game. Fairly light. Abby and I just played this once, played it with the basic variant as opposed to the advanced Juice Factory variant. You have a bunch of fruit gatherer type of tiles. You'll slide them however far you can slide them in one line is how many of that fruit token you'll get. So if I can slide this banana token 2 spaces, I'm going to get 2 bananas. I can then convert those fruits that I gather either into getting boats off of my island so I can clear off more space, or into new tiles, new buildings, new businesses to add to my island. That's really the gist of it. There isn't a ton of complexity to it. Slide a tile, buy a business, or clear a boat, and go from there. But engaging, I would say more setup than I would want for just one play, but fast enough of a game that you could play a couple of games back-to-back pretty readily. I thought it was a good efficiency puzzle, and certainly for Capstone family, it felt like it fit like a glove. I have not played... Did you play the advanced variant when you played this one, Sean?
Have not played the advanced variant, no.
Okay. Yeah, it's on the other side of the main scoring board. It's called the Juice Factory. I don't know how it works. I'm excited to try it. But yeah, that's Juicy Fruits. My first new play of 2022, because the other one I'm going to talk about was a holiday game. So,
well, let me say this about Juicy Fruits. So when I had first talked about it on the podcast, I had played it just one time. Maybe we played twice. No, I think it's just one time. 2 players with our buddy Matt Walker. But since then, I have played it 3 players at Empire with me, Raquel, and Chewy. She did well enough. Like some strategy was probably a little bit beyond her, but she had fun. Actually, no, I think we were about 4/5 of the way through the game, and she was like, I think I'm kind of done. I'm like, well, let's just finish it up. We're almost done here. So she liked it, but probably a little bit longer for her attention span, but yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Cool.
Well, I guess I'm going to continue with the theme of talking about board games that have already been talked about on the podcast. And that's Anno 1800 by Martin Wallace. This is something that our buddy Aaron from Boards Alive, when he was on, he talked about. And here's the interesting thing. Aaron and I have very similar gaming tastes. If I like a game, if he likes a game, the inverse is very likely to be true. He was pretty lukewarm. And yeah, he was pretty lukewarm on this one. I really enjoyed this. I really like this. It's from Cosmos, and it's just a super dry hero of it's worker management, because it's not really worker placement. You have your own board of these different buildings, and then you have different levels of workers. And so you put a certain worker on this building, and it produces this type of good. You then spend that good immediately. So there's no like amassing or collection of goods. You spend that to then get another building tile that gives you some sort of upgraded resource, which you're going to use to kind of chain these things together on your turn. Ultimately, you're trying to empty cards from your hand, and it's a little bit of like recipe fulfillment. And because you're trying to get rid of your hand, that's how you trigger the end game, and usually you're going to score more points if you're able to get rid of your hand. You also have to be careful because there are actions that will give you more workers that you need. Because there's basically place a worker, do the action, okay, next player's turn, and you do that until you've placed all of your workers, or otherwise you reset early and pull all your workers back, which you may have to do sometimes. But every time you gain a new worker, you gain a new card to your hand. So you just got to kind of watch out for that. But usually with the recipe fulfillment on the cards, there's some sort of benefit, whether it's points, whether it's some type of resource, or you get to take a free action or something like, or extra action, really, something like that. This is very much, it kind of reminded me, not in terms of gameplay, but just in terms of the feel of like a Le Havre, where it's just, okay, go get some resources, turn them into other resources, turn those resources into even better resources. And if you don't like that, you don't like that. I really liked it. We played 4 players. It was me, Eugene, Nick, and Matt. And I was like, Nick was less so. Nick less so. I think Nick enjoyed it well enough. But I think kind of dry Euros are not really his thing. But as far as, I wouldn't call this medium. I'd probably call it medium heavy, the lower end of medium heavy, if that makes sense. It's based on an IP. It's based on the Anno 1800 video game from Ubisoft. I know nothing about it. I looked it up afterwards, and I'm like, okay, it's like a city planning game. It looked interesting. Nothing that I'm really willing to give a shot. But no, I'm very interested to play this again. I think I would like this at 3 players, which is kind of where a lot of medium heavy Euros tend to shine. But yeah, I like this, and I think you might like this with the proper teach.
Okay.
So
Martin Wallace has been hit or miss for me as a designer. Right. So I'm not 100% sold just from the design name, and I don't know anything about the video game. So it doesn't have a ton going into it, but yeah, I'll give it a shot. Doesn't sound too awful.
Yeah, I was very happy with it, and I think we'd like to get it back to the table fairly soon. So that is Anno 1800 by Cosmos and Martin Wallace.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Sean, I got to play over the holiday season. This was a gift from my brother for Christmas. He got me 3 games. He got me Catapult Feud, Micro Macro Crime City Full House, which I already had, so I swapped that actually for Juicy Fruits, effectively, and then The Crew, Mission Deep Sea. And I'll talk more in depth about The Crew, Mission Deep Sea, because I think it's the most interesting of that group. So The Crew, Mission Deep Sea is a standalone successor to the hit game and Kennerspiel. Did it win the Kennerspiel, or was it just nominated?
I think it.
I don't know.
Did it win the Kennerspiel?
Maybe.
Because
anyway,
Macro Micro won the Spiel.
Yeah. Anyway, like, who knows? We can certainly look it up as we're talking here. But The Crew, Mission Deep Sea is effectively the same core mechanics, but they have one very key twist on this game that sets it apart. So in The Crew itself, and in The Crew Mission Deep Sea, it's a cooperative trick-taking game. So you're dealt out a hand of cards. There are certain goals you have to accomplish, and those goals can change. So, for instance, it might be, Sean, if you're playing, you might need to win the green 4. And if you don't win the green 4, you lose the mission. You have to try it all over again. There's a case book of increasingly difficult missions. Some of them might be win a trick with a 1 or don't have anything to communicate with. But basically, you have this hand of cards. You're not allowed to talk about them. You can provide some information from your hand in a limited way, communicating whether a card of a suit is the highest, the lowest, or the only of that suit. A big hit during 2020. One of my top picks last year, in listening back to that episode, if not my top pick, was certainly one of my most played games. What the Crew Mission Deep Sea does very differently is it eliminates a whole bunch of tokens. So this game, for its various missions, had, okay, you have to win this mission first, and this one second, and this one third. And there was a deck of cards that corresponded with that for the various missions that you would pick. What the Crew Mission Deep Sea does is it takes all of the possible tasks and things within the game and gives them a difficulty score from 1 to, I think, 4 or 5 is the most you would have. And then it takes all of those tasks and puts them in a deck. And it says, when you go through a task in the mission log, it'll say, play a round of this where your total number of difficulty points is equal to this. And so you're going to get wildly divergent tasks on the same difficulty level. So if my difficulty level's 5, that might be 5 1 difficulty tasks that are all relatively simple, but some people are going to have multiple of them. Or it could be one really, really tricky task, like I have to win the first trick and the last trick. So it has a wide variety of tasks on the mission deck itself, kind of baked in to what you need to do. It sounds like a small tweak or a small twist. It's really effective. It does a couple of things. One, it makes the same round feel very different depending on what you get dealt out of that deck. Basically, you're going to deal cards out until you hit that difficulty number. But it also adds to the replayability of the game. Because I could ignore the case log effectively and say, we're going to try and beat a 10 difficulty task. Great, shuffle the deck, deal out 10 difficulty points worth of tasks, and you're off to the races. It's a really streamlined mission system for that reason, and the variety within that deck is really cool. We enjoyed it a lot. This was one, played it at 3 players, would play it with other folks and in other groups. It's the Crew remains a really accessible game, one that you can teach folks pretty easily, and one that folks tend to enjoy, in my experience, whether it's newer gamers, more experienced gamers. I think this is a worthy twist.
So let me ask you this. So I think a couple questions spring to mind. First, if I already own the Crew, which I do I need to buy Mission Deep Sea?
Need is a strong word.
Well, you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying.
Yeah. I think if you really appreciated the Crew, the original Crew, I think you're going to really appreciate this because it's a better version of the Crew. If I didn't own the Crew at all, I would say you should buy the Crew Mission Deep Sea.
Okay.
It's slightly more advanced, though, because you're going to get some of the trickier, weirder tasks that could just come out of the deck earlier in your play experience of this, whereas the Crew itself has a pretty structured flow to it, and you have a sense of basically what kind of task you're going to get with this mission. So, it's tricky. I think there's sort of room in the collection for both, kind of.
Okay.
It's an evolution. It's an arguably more advanced version of the Crew in many ways. It's not so different though that it's tough. It's right on that edge, Sean. I think if you love the Crew, you should get the Crew Mission Deep Sea.
Okay. And then, so do you think and that you kind of answered it, I think, a little bit. The next question, as far as, do you need to own both? Like, in other words, once you've acquired Mission Deep Sea, do you need to keep the original Crew in your collection?
Probably not.
Okay.
For instance, I have both of these now. I think I am far, far, far more likely to pull out the Crew Mission Deep Sea, even for newer groups, than I would for the Crew. So I'd say it's a new standalone version which does the same thing in a lot of ways, but I think from just how that deck is designed, I would prefer to break that out rather than the base game Crew. That being said, I have some experience in the Crew itself. So if you haven't played the game at all, I don't know if I'd recommend starting with Mission Deep Sea. But if I'm teaching the game to new folks, I don't mind because I have enough depth of experience myself to explain the tasks.
Gotcha.
So it's complicated, to say the least.
Okay.
It sort of replaces it.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. So that's the Crew Mission Deep Sea from Cosmos.
All right. Well, the last game I'm going to talk about is Faux Diamonds, kind of like Dr. Faux. Is it Dr. Faux or is it F-A-U-X? Oh, you weren't here for that.
No, I know the game though. That was I like that game a lot. I didn't listen back to the review, but
yeah,
I enjoyed that game.
So
anyway.
this is faux as in, fake diamonds, Faux Diamonds from Eagle Gryphon Games. Designed by a relative newcomer to the design scene. Let me see here. Oh, it's Mike Fitzgerald. Never mind.
Oh, no. Yeah, not new at all.
So just full disclosure, I think, Mike's a friend of the show. He's a friend of both of ours. And we're obviously big fans of his. As a designer and as a person, because he's a really cool dude. So this was a Kickstarter fulfillment from Eagle Gryphon Games. This was, they did this together with Baseball Highlights, the dice game, which I could talk about right now as part of this section of the show, but I'm not. I'm going to save that for later.
Oh.
It's not that. It's not that, but it's something else. And it's a good something else. So, all right, I've spoiled too much. I've said too much, Alex. You've gotten it out of me. So I want to talk about Faux Diamonds. Now, I went to the Kickstarter page just now because in my mind, when this came out, I was like, okay, I'm going to back Baseball Highlights, the dice game. You didn't back it, did you?
I did. I have both of these games. I have not played either, but I have.
You haven't played either. Okay. Yeah, I was like, I thought, okay, anyway. And then I saw Faux Diamonds. I'm like, well, of course. Like, yeah, absolutely. This sounds great. And for some reason, I imagined in my mind that Faux Diamonds was the spiritual successor to Diamonds, another trick-taking game that Mike did originally with Stronghold, I believe, which is a game that I love, game that we played a bunch. We were just talking about it, actually, not too long ago. But anyway, I thought it was like a spiritual successor. And then on New Year's Day, we went over to Rory and his fiancée Marie's house to play some games, eat some food, and we played a bunch of Fuji Flush because Chewy really likes Fuji Flush, and then we also kind of ended the evening with a couple different hands of Faux Diamonds, two full games of it, in fact. And I was like, well, this is really nothing like the original Diamonds. I'm not sure why this is a spiritual successor. Looking at the Kickstarter page, they didn't indicate that, so that's just my mistake. That's just my assumptions kind of gone crazy there. No, this is very much a different game. Yes, it's a trick-taking game. In the original Diamonds, the different suits had different powers associated with them when you played them. Here, you are accumulating points by selling diamond cards. So basically, it's a deck of 4 suits from 1 to 13, and then I think there are 10 of these faux diamond cards. And so basically, after you get dealt out your cards, the starting player is going to lead a trick, and they're going to play down a card with a particular suit. If you can follow with the same suit, you must. If you can't, then you can play an offsuit card, and when you play an offsuit card, you're selling it to the diamond market for a certain value. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. However, I should also point out that at any time, whether you can follow or you can't follow, you can also choose to sell a faux diamond card, which gets sold as a diamond for the market value that matches the suit that's being led, if that makes sense. Now, here's what's really, really interesting. There are these little tracker boards for each of the colors of diamonds, and you have this little magnifying glass that's set at a starting value, and every single time that you sell a diamond, the magnifying glass rotates clockwise, changing the diamond value. Some of them are going to steadily increase. They'll go like 1 and then 2 and then 3. Others are going to fluctuate wildly. They'll go 1 and then the next one is 7, and then the next one is 2, and then the next one is 6. Weird stuff. But what's really interesting is that there's this huge timing factor, right? Because maybe I lead with a gray card, because right now, if I win this, I'm playing my gray 13. Because if I win this, I'm going to make $7,000, or 7 points, basically. And I'm going to win that trick. So no one can play something that's going to keep me from winning that trick, because 13 is the highest. But if someone has a faux diamond card, it's going to get sold as that gray, and now it's going to shift the market before I have the chance to actually win the hand, because you get paid immediately when you're quote unquote selling a diamond. And so now it shifts, and maybe it just reduces the price like dramatically. And you have to watch out for that, right? Very interesting stuff. And what's really cool too is that there are like 4 or 5 different tiles for each color, for each suit of diamonds. And so there's different cards that say, okay, for this game, you need pink A, yellow B, black or gray D, and blue A, whatever. So a lot of variability there. We really enjoyed this. I mean, we played a second hand, right? It's depending on the number of players, we played 4 players, and I believe that was 4 hands, or 4 rounds, and so we played two full games of it. We enjoyed this quite a bit. It was, it's a pretty straightforward trick-taking game in many ways, but there's this timing issue that's really important and really difficult to kind of master. But I thought this was fantastic, and everyone that played it. By this point, Raquel had passed out, so it was Rory, Marie, Chewy was playing on our Switch, and then Mariah. Mariah was playing with us. So it was a lot of fun. I think that if you enjoy trick-taking games, definitely check this out. It's great. Another great design by our buddy Mike Fitzgerald.
I'm excited to try it. It's just a matter of getting enough folks around the table, I think, to have it make sense.
There are 2-player rules. There's 3-player rules. I always feel like trick-taking games with less than 4 players is kind of weird. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. We enjoyed it.
Very cool. Well, that's going to do it for recent plays. We haven't talked about the structure of the show. So, Sean, what are we doing? Are we doing best of the year? Are we doing the Jamey Stegmaier interview next?
I say let's throw it over to Jamey.
All right. A few weeks ago, I sat down with fellow St. Louisan Jamey Stegmaier from Stonemaier Games. We had a great conversation, mostly focused on what this past year and the pandemic as a whole has been like from a publisher's point of view. Some interesting thoughts there, and looking forward to y'all hearing it. Check it out. Well, Sean, the Game Toppers 3.0 Kickstarter is in the books, and thanks to a whole bunch of backers, Game Toppers had a heck of a Kickstarter campaign, more than $800,000 raised to get more Game Toppers, new features, all sorts of fun stuff headed folks' way.
Wait, did you say 800,000?
I did say that amount. Yes.
Oh my goodness. That's a ton of money.
Sean, did you make it in time? Are you part of that group?
It's over? It's over? Like over?
No, it's done. I'm sorry you missed your window. But the good news, Sean, is that if you keep an eye on the Game Toppers LLC website, the late pledge manager should be open in the near future. Take a look there, and you can still get in on all the fun, get the newest features, get yourself a Watson, or get yourself, I don't know, whatever you want. Awesome game mats, rails, something cool to really take your gaming experience to the next level without getting a fully dedicated gaming table, which is exactly what Game Toppers is all about. Check them out, GameToppersLLC.com, because if it ain't a showstopper, it ain't a Game Topper. Well, it's been a while since he's joined us, but for our year-end episode, wanted to invite in one of the core members of the St. Louis board gaming establishment, Jamey Stegmaier from Stonemaier Games. How are you, Jamey?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Alex.
So, what had me want to reach out to you was thinking about from a publisher side, the pandemic, because we're now, closing in on 2 years into this thing. And you have a phenomenal blog that folks can read where you keep people updated on all sorts of fun things. And there's actually another topic I'll bring up from later on. But I wanted to start off with, what do you think has been the biggest effect on Stonemaier Games of this so far?
Well, yeah, I don't know how much you want to talk about this part of it, but I think freight shipping has probably been the biggest impact on us. So there's that side of it, the freight shipping side. And then there's the other side that we can talk about later of how the pandemic has impacted like the types of things that we make. So yeah, I would say that those are maybe the two different sides of it. Do you want to talk about freight shipping a little bit? I know it's not the most exciting topic, but it's there. Yeah.
But I think it's key, and I think it's the thing that especially Kickstarter backers, and not that you run Kickstarters anymore, but you're certainly an expert in that space. But I think it's the thing that folks most don't get in the process is that fulfillment side and the shipping side. And yeah, you had provided an update earlier this year mentioning some of the effects and impacts on pricing. Has that continued? Has that gotten worse? Has it gotten better? What's the current state like?
Yeah, so I wrote a couple articles on it this year, and in the first article, I talked about how freight shipping prices have gone up. Oh, and I guess I should just define this for anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about with freight shipping. It's, a lot of games are made in China, and to get those games to distributors and fulfillment centers around the world, we have to freight ship them from using a combination of ocean, train, and truck to get them to their final destinations. That's what I mean by freight shipping. And earlier in the year, I wrote about how the prices for freight shipping have gone way up. And so in the past, whereas shipping a 40-foot container might have cost around $4,000, now we just paid for some containers of that size that cost over $30,000.
Woo!
So a massive increase. And I was seeing a lot of people on social media kind of throwing around those big numbers. Those big numbers are a big deal, especially for smaller publishers, but for any publisher. But I wanted to kind of stress a little bit that the more important number, I think, is not that big number, but how much of an increase per unit within that container you are increasing the cost of each product. So if you have if you have a game like Gloomhaven, a giant box of those, you can fit a lot fewer of those in a shipping container. And so the impact on each individual unit is a lot more. Whereas if you have a game like The Mind in one of those shipping containers, probably has a much smaller impact. And this actually will dovetail into what we talk about later in terms of the packaging and the size of games that we decide to make. So that was the first side of things. You also asked how has it changed over time? And so the price of it is daunting to me, because that is a big increase in cost, no matter what type of product is in that container. In the end, we've seen some huge bills come through, but also the delays we're seeing at port right now are what's really keeping me up at night. Containers where we think we can get them out of port, and then they are stuck there for months and months. And that I've seen a lot of patience from consumers about that. I really appreciate that. But it's incredibly stressful for me as a publisher to know that the containers have arrived. They're not that far away from where we need them to be, but they just can't be delivered yet because of all the other areas of the supply chain that are messing up that process.
Have you considered buying a Stegmaier boat to just go out and fetch them yourselves out there?
You say that, I think, with a little bit of levity there, but literally, yes, I looked into not buying a boat, but chartering a boat specifically for the game industry. Earlier this year, like that was a legitimate discussion I had with our freight shipping company or logistics partner, because I was like, it would take a lot more than just Stegmaier Games to do this, but if it's possible, if we can just have a boat reserved for the game industry, would that do it? And I couldn't get a boat, and B, I'm kind of glad I didn't, because a lot of the issues aren't even just specific to the boat. That's part of it, but it's more specific to the containers and getting those containers out of port. So even if we had a boat, we could have still had a whole boat full of containers stuck at port for months and months.
Well, the solution's obvious. You have to build your own port. You have to get your own trucking company and add that into the mix and new business lines that Stegmaier's pursuing. That's the only solution I can hear.
So we go from a no overhead company to a all-in full overhead company. Yeah.
It seems. Hey, look, it seems like you're overdue. I'm just saying. Now that Wingspan's crossed the 1 million copy mark, now that you can officially go all in, Jamey. I know it's what you've always wanted. I think that's, especially hearing that price increase on the surface is, but it sounds like the more painful part again has been the waiting and the uncertainty on timing, especially as you're communicating with distributors and customers and trying to, you are meticulous about how you release information about games and how you release games. And I can imagine there's some element of that that's maddening when things get thrown into as much disarray as they've been.
Yeah, it is on many levels. I mean, there's the level of like, there's a game that I really want to release early in 2022. And it will probably arrive at port with plenty of time to release it in 2022. But I have no idea, absolutely no idea when it will get out of port. And using the current data I have, it's probably 2 to 3 months. And so that's excruciating to know that we are that close to being ready to release a game. but we can't get it there. And the other side of it is, a few months ago, we had some containers arrive at port, and we got a notice that there was a delivery scheduled to put them in our St. Louis fulfillment center. And so it coincided with a newsletter. So we let people order those products, which we rarely do. We try to wait until the products are actually in our fulfillment center. And every time I don't do that, I regret it. But this time I really regret it, because those containers got buried at port, buried under other containers, and have just very recently been released, but still haven't been scheduled to pick up. So we have customers who paid for a product 2 months ago that I thought I was going to have in our fulfillment center, and they haven't received it yet. That to me is excruciating, because that is like one of the huge reasons I moved away from Kickstarter, so that I wouldn't have customers waiting months for something they paid for. I want them to pay for it and then get it a few weeks later at most. So yeah, it's been, again, I want to stress that I am amazed and incredibly grateful for the patience of our customers. I think that it could have been much worse if that wasn't the case, and they've been really awesome.
Oh, I having been on the Kickstarter side of that, and seeing some of the Kickstarters I had worked on at my previous job, and how some of them are still running into fulfillment issues. Yeah, you are lucky to have a low level of nastiness, Jamey. I think some of that comes from the kind of community you've cultivated. So I guess that speaks to that too.
I think so. Yeah, I think there's definitely a part of that, and I can't even imagine what it looks like on the Kickstarter side right now. I hope people are being patient, but I understand if they're not. That if they invested $100 in a game a couple years ago that they thought they'd get earlier this year and it still hasn't arrived, I can see that being frustrating for someone when they want that $100 to spend on something else. Yeah.
So, looking at your day-to-day, has a larger percentage of that shifted into trying to sort through some of these logistical issues now that the kind of the pipeline has to be a little bit slowed necessarily just based on when games are showing up? Has that adjusted your day-to-day?
Well, one of our focuses this year was, I don't know if it's really affected day to day, but one of our goals this year was to ship more stuff directly from China. So rather than having a shipping container come to a warehouse here in the US and then splitting up the items in that container and sending them to a bunch of different distributors, instead we tried to go to the distributors in advance and to pre-pack those containers so that a specific container can go directly to a specific distributor. And that has actually been somewhat a saving grace for us this year, because otherwise we're adding multiple layers and multiple opportunities for delays to getting games to retailers and distributors. But I cannot say that has been part of my day-to-day, because another Alex, the Alex who works full-time at Stegmaier Games, our director of sales, he has taken that on and has done a wonderful job with it. So it is very much a part of his day-to-day or week-to-week, but not mine, because Alex handles it.
There you go. Not this Alex. To be clear, different Alex, smarter Alex, designer Alex. Shifting gears just a little bit, has this, as you decide what to publish, what to pursue, what to look deeper into for Stegmaier as a brand, as a company going forward, has the pandemic affected that? Not that Stegmaier was necessarily a party game company, right. The types of experiences that need 6, 7, 8 people in person to really make sense. But still, I can imagine, I know you talked a lot about playtesting challenges and finding it hard to see how a game plays at larger counts. Has that impacted how you've games you might choose to put out?
It has a little bit. One of the I would say the fortunate things about Stegmaier Games is that part of what we try to do with every game is include a strong solo mode and have it playable from 2 to 5 players and have it legitimately be fun at all of those player counts, and sometimes even a little bit higher player counts, 6 or 7. But that 2-player count is really crucial, because I've always wanted couples or roommates or partners to be able to play games and have just as much fun as when they want to bring those games to a larger group. And so that's already been part of our ethos. It has been for a long time now, many years now, but I don't know, it's made me appreciate that we kind of did that, because I'm really glad we have that in our portfolio. The only downside of that is that because we have games that scale from those lower player counts to the higher player counts, they often require larger boxes than if we were just selling a 2-player only game. And box size, like I mentioned in terms of shipping containers, has been on my mind a lot more this year than it has in the past.
It's a tricky one to think about, the box size piece. And I'm putting a note in my mind about the 2-player side, because I was going to ask you about something specifically around that, not necessarily pandemic related, but going to box size.
Yeah.
It's an interesting balancing act, because I think from a customer point of view, there's a value or a sense of I'm getting more if I'm getting a larger box. Now, granted, in some of those cases, and we, in our previous episode, to when this one released, reviewed Machikoro 2, and that's a big empty box. There's just not a lot in there. But I think in order to justify a certain price point, I think publishers often think they need to have a larger box for that to make any sense. So how have you thought about that, and where have you settled on that issue?
Yes, it's so I kind of, over the years, I've been moving towards what I'll determine as like a standard box size, which is the Ticket to Ride box size that you see on so many shelves. So we've moved towards that for so many products. And this year I was like, okay, do we need to reevaluate that? Do we need to move away from that? There are games like Red Rising, the retail version of Red Rising doesn't have a fancy insert. It's mostly just cards, so there are a bunch of tokens in the game, and there's a board. And so the board is like the constricting factor in that the board prevents the game from being a smaller box. But there are probably ways that we could have worked around that if we had really thought about it and made that a smaller box size. We could have used a neoprene mat that rolls up, or we could have used a few tiles that you slide together to form that board to get it to fit into a smaller box. At the same time, it would have had, like, one of the big things that we did this year is get games into Target, and Target likes a big shelf presence. And so having like a tiny little box for Red Rising may have decreased Target's interest in it. And like you said, it might have made someone feel like they're getting less stuff because it's a tiny little box on the shelf, even though it's in my opinion, a fairly robust game. So I don't know. There's a balance there that I'm still working out, and we tend to pack our boxes pretty full anyway. And so it's mostly going to, I think, come to my mind for expansions. And although there's another thing, like, people always want expansions that can fit into the core game box. And so do we make a smaller core game box, but then eliminate the possibility of expansions fitting in there? I don't know. It's a lot to balance, a lot to think about.
I think you have to make a legendary box for every game you publish from now on. I'm excited to see the Rolling Realms legendary box.
We might need to do that someday with as many promos that we have in the works for Rolling Realms. We'll see.
Yeah, okay, that'd be interesting to see someday if you have to go to some sort of collector's edition. It's been interesting seeing the partnerships on that one, by the way. Super cool to see other game universes working their way into the Rolling Realms universe, the Stegmaier-verse.
Stegmaier, yeah.
That's not very catchy. You gotta get someone in marketing to come up with something a little better than that. But yeah. Okay, going back a little bit, and speaking of, I guess, the Stegmaier-verse, there was a little note that you had in an article. It was this was one of my favorite articles of the year that you put out. And by the way, would strongly recommend Jamey's blog to anyone who's a board game fan, even if there isn't a Stegmaier game that you love. I think it gives you a really good insight into the industry. But the article in question that I'll bring up is, if tomorrow you became the president of Stegmaier Games, what would you do? And one of the ideas you mentioned there in this article in April was the possibility of creating an imprint for games that would fall outside of Stegmaier's current brand. 2-player only games, family filler games, and then the name Pebblemaier came up.
Yeah.
Is Pebblemaier still alive? Is this something you've gone away from? What's the thought process on an imprint right now?
I appreciate your enthusiasm for it, but I haven't actually thought about it all that much. It was one of those ideas expressed in that survey that it definitely came externally. That wasn't from me. It was from something that other people were excited about, or some people were excited about. But it was one that I was a little hesitant to pursue because I guess I just know how busy I am and how busy all of us at Stegmaier Games are already, and how much I like our focus on only releasing 1 or 2 new games a year and only 1 or 2 new expansions. And so adding an imprint would just inherently add a lot of work and a lot of other products that might take the spotlight away from the designers and the products that we work so hard to have a big spotlight on throughout the year. And so it hasn't I'm glad you were excited about it, but it hasn't been something that I've thought about all that much since that article. Yeah,
I think the excitement comes in, if only in that you'd be able to expand the spectrum of, I guess, what Stonemaier could put out. And, there's some element of maybe you're not as excited about putting out, say, the family filler or 2-player only or that kind of game anyway. But because of Stonemaier's core philosophies, which I think you do a fantastic job of sticking to, I think there's some amazing designs that might come to you or that you might be excited about that you might not be able to publish as a Stonemaier game just because it doesn't fit into that core design tenet. But I could be wrong. Maybe there's some more flexibility there than I'm thinking.
There are some ways to work around that a little bit. I can think of 3 right now, and I'm going to try to talk about them in vague ways because they're all spoilers.
You can talk about them in specific ways too. That's
I mean, there is a way that we have a sneaky way of doing a 2-player game that'll make more sense next year. We have actually another sneaky way of doing a 2-player game that involves an expansion that I'll talk about next year. And there's the possibility, and this isn't a spoiler either way because there's nothing set in stone, but I think there's the possibility of collaborations with other publishers that don't have such strict guidelines as to like player count, where those collaborations could lead to games that are slightly outside of our ethos. In fact, one of those already exists. The Euphoria game, Leaders of Euphoria. We worked with another company that specialized in large group social bluffing deduction games. And after we knew that we weren't going into that genre, that realm for our games, we were like, let's just work with you. You seem really excited about this. We have a world that we're excited about that we'd love to see in other games. And they made Leaders of Euphoria. So I think that type of thing could happen in the future as well.
I'm curious too how the impact, not necessarily the pandemic, but just in terms of how games have performed, would impact what you would choose to publish or not. As an example, Pendulum is a game that Abby and I really enjoyed and had a lot of. It was innovative in a really cool way, and I think by Stonemaier standards, though, and based on sales and the reports and all that, and I know you don't want to slam stuff, but it certainly didn't seem like on the sales level it lived up to maybe what might have been expected of it. Did that, how that game performed, has that had an impact on what you might look to going forward?
It has. I mean, I'm always, our overarching goal is to bring joy to tabletops worldwide, and if we're only doing that for 10,000 tabletops, that's only 10,000 is a lot for certain games. For us, that is very low. And so, yeah, that Pendulum, it was a great reminder that we need to look for some red flags, some warning signs during the submission and development process. And sometimes decide, hey, this game just isn't as excited as we were about this game. It is not resonating with playtesters, say, and we need to maybe not publish it. So on that level, but I would say that's for every game. I wouldn't say that's pandemic specific in any way. It's just looking for those red flags earlier and just acknowledging, even after, I have that sunk cost fallacy. We've already put all this time and money and work into this game, but people just aren't getting excited about it. And we need to, I need to acknowledge that and sometimes decide not to pursue it or decide not to move forward with it.
Have there been projects since then that you've taken that approach with?
Yes. There's one. There was a game idea that I had that I didn't have time to work on, and so I talked to another designer about working on it, and that designer worked on it for a couple of years, really, trying to make it work. And they acknowledged earlier this year, they came to me and they said, I'm really sorry. I tried my best to make this work, but it's just not working. I'm no longer excited about it. Playtesters, I just can't get playtesters excited about the various iterations of this game. And even though we had invested in it from a design perspective and an art perspective already, we had to decide not to necessarily give up on it permanently, but move on from that designer. The designer decided they didn't want to work on it anymore. And we took a break from that idea. I want to revisit it someday because I still love the art that we already have for this game. But yeah, it's definitely on the back shelf for now.
5 years from now, Stonemaier Games is still around and thriving. What happened in those 5 years, do you think, that has led to your passion still continuing to be as high as it is, and the company doing what you wanted to do. What does that 5 years look like?
Well, a lot of it, I think, is to continue doing what we do, having the focused strategy of having 1 or 2 games a year, 1 or 2 expansions. And I think a big part of it is also that we continue to engage the community of people who is excited about our games, but also make sure we are always being inclusive and welcoming to other people who want to join that community and who don't know about our games yet and want to be excited about them. I know those are kind of general, vague things, but they are really important to me, both of those elements. I do think that it would be great to have. So we have like the big 3 at Stonemaier Games. We have Viticulture, Scythe, and Wingspan. Those are our perennial bestsellers, our perennial evergreen games that continue to sell the core game and the expansions. And it's been a couple of years since we had Wingspan, and so I'm hopeful that one of the games in 2022 will be the next game that has that impact. Maybe not on the level of Wingspan. I don't know if we'll ever have that again. But Scythe has sold 500,000 copies. Viticulture is coming up, I think, on 200,000. And I always hope that from one of our games, but I think it will be important to the longevity of our company. You're talking 5 years out, that we have another one of those perennial hits coming out next year or 2023 at the latest.
Yeah, I was going to say, does it take one every 2, 3, 4 years to really sustain things for you?
I think so. Yeah, we had Scythe come out in 2016, then Wingspan was early 2019. So yeah, maybe every 3 years, I think, would be pretty important. Because otherwise, like if we just have a bunch of games that sell out the first print run and then kind of, go out of fashion after that, for a while, games like Viticulture, Scythe, and Wingspan will keep us going pretty strongly, but that will only last so long. Like eventually, Wingspan is no longer going to sell 500,000 copies a year. Scythe will dwindle a little bit. Viticulture will probably dwindle as well. And so, with our goal of bringing joy to tabletops worldwide, I think we need to continue to really focus on what that means and how we can do that with new products.
What I've heard based on pattern is next year is going to be a good year, and then just skip out on any Stonemaier release in 2023, 2024, because the next big one's not coming until 2025. Is that what I'm getting?
I hope not, no. I mean, we really do hope this for all of our games. I'm really excited about the game that I was talking about in early 2022, and I'm really excited about a game that I hope will be ready in time, but it depends on freight shipping. So we'll see. But
which one's going to be that cornerstone between the two? You have to predict now. Is it the early one or the late one?
Oh, it's hard to tell. I mean, Alex, I think you've actually seen the early 2022 game, but we can't talk about it publicly yet.
I haven't. I think okay. Someone mentioned that it was incredibly valuable, and someone was joking about it, and I just didn't look around carefully enough. So next time I'm over there, I will. But no, I'm actually absolutely oblivious. So. Much like the listeners.
I think the second game I'm talking about has more potential of being really, really strong out of the gate, and I hope it will have longevity. And I think I'll spoil it if I say anything, but I am really, really excited about the early 2022 release. We'll see how it goes.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, Jamey, I appreciate you taking the time to jump in. It's always a pleasure, not just having you here locally in the community, but also, again, reading your words of wisdom on that blog. Anything you want to plug here as we wrap up?
Well, I know I've done a lot of the talking today, but I really respect your viewpoints as a person, a friend, and as one of the members of the Dukes of Dice. Is there anything that you have noticed this year that you think that publishers like me should pay attention to moving forward?
Turning it around on me, man.
Yeah.
Ooh. Okay, I may have to take this one offline because you've hit me with one that's interesting. I actually don't have any collected thoughts on this, partly because what's been weird for me is with the pregnancy and with baby Ruby coming along, there's been less engagement in terms of in-person events, things along those lines. I will say this. And I don't know if this is something for publishers to keep in mind, organizers to keep in mind. I am absolutely not a long-term online gaming person. There are games I enjoy for that purpose. A Rocket League is a more than a 2,000-hour game for me at this point, as crazy as that sounds. But in terms of board gaming, it's just not an experience that resonates with me. So I hope publishers, as shiny toys like NFTs and other random things crop up in the digital space, while that's all very exciting, I hope folks don't lose a core sense of what's special about this hobby, which is that in-person connection and facilitating that. So I don't know. That's a very vague answer, but maybe there's something of value in there, Jamey.
There definitely is. And yeah, and if you have any other answers in your podcast, I look forward to hearing them. But I agree. It's been interesting to see the shift to games. I'm playing games on like Board Game Arena, and I hear every week on the Secret Cabal, they're talking about a game, and they say we played it on Tabletop Simulator, and I appreciate platforms like Tabletopia and Tabletop Simulator, but to me it is so different than that experience of connecting with people, connecting with the tactile nature of games on the actual tabletop. So
yes, yeah.
I
and the one thing for you specifically, bring back multi-layered player boards. That's it may not come back, but I miss them dearly. I was reminded of that with another game I played lately. So
cool.
Anyway,
cool. Yeah, as long as we can. I always worry about the warping that happened with some of the early versions of those sideboards, but yeah, maybe, I think we've worked out some of those solutions with later printings. Yeah.
Oh,
we'll bring it back.
Huh. Okay. All right. Breaking some news here at the very end. Jamey, thank you so much for your time, and really appreciate it.
Thanks, Alex. Take care.
Thanks again to Jamey for joining us, and excited to see what comes out of Stegmaier and the rest of the publishing community in 2022, which feeds in well, Sean, to our look back at the year that was 2021. A little bit late. We're recording this on January 8th. So, a little bit later than most retrospectives, but it's a true retrospective. We have every single day of 2021 is accounted for in this retrospective. No days missed.
It's kind of like this. It's like how long until it's inappropriate for you to wish someone a Happy New Year? That's a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode. So can you still wish someone a Happy New Year as we're recording on January 8th? Happy New Year's, Alex. Is that appropriate?
Yeah, it's fine. Happy New Year, Sean.
Okay. Next recording, if I wish you a Happy New Year's again, is that going to be inappropriate?
It's a little late.
Okay.
I don't know about inappropriate, but it's a little late.
What if I wish you a Happy New Year in April? Can we then say it's inappropriate?
It would be bizarre. I don't know about that, the word inappropriate, but bizarre.
All right.
Yeah. Anyway. Cool. Well, Sean, this year that was, I think, was epitomized in some ways by my most recent trip to Miniature Market.
Okay.
I received a copy of Micro Macro Crime City Full House, or Micro Macro Full House, something in that range. A duplicate copy. So I took it back to Miniature Market, and I was able to exchange it for something. And I brought it in, and this is the first time I have ever been in Miniature Market and not seen something or multiple somethings that were clear. I should bring this home. This is definitely something. There was an awful lot of, I have no idea what this is. I haven't heard of this one. This is kind of what, it was the most alienating experience I think I've had in the board game space in quite some time, because I felt so disconnected and just unaware of what's going on. And as I was thinking about that, is this about me, or did something happen to the board game space in 2021? And Sean, I want to start off with a statistic.
Okay.
For you. 2020 had the following games in the top 100 on BGG. So for folks who aren't aware, there's a whole ranking system on BGG.
I know. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Did you do this same thing?
Not intentionally, but I noticed this.
Okay. So, number 6 of all time, Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion. Number 21, Dune Imperium. Number 34, Lost Ruins of Arnak. Number 38, Eclipse, Second Dawn for the Galaxy. Number 56, On Mars. Number 82, Pandemic Legacy Season 0. Now, to be clear, the way this ranking system works, it takes a critical mass of reviews in order for something to get up there, right? If something's reviewed averaging a 9.5, but only 200 people have reviewed it, it's not going to crack the top 100. You have to have both well-regarded and well-regarded by a lot of people. Sean, you may have noticed this, so this may be something you are already aware of the answer to. How many games from 2021 are in the top 100? Knowing that, this is not 100% fair because there's some releases late in the year that could eventually creep up.
Right.
It's not a perfect system, right? But how many are in the top 100?
0.
That is a correct answer. It is 0. How many are in the top 150?
I think 0. Yeah, 0.
Yeah, it's 0. There are only 3 in the top 200. The Crew Mission Deep Sea, which we just talked about, Cascadia, which you might hear a little bit more about from me, and Sleeping Gods. Now, are there some games that could make a run and crack the top 100? Sure. I mean, there's a thought that maybe as more people might play Oath, as much as I don't like that game, that could creep up there. Ark Nova is averaging an 8.7 on 1,500 reviews. It's just in the top 450 right now, but that's one I've heard a lot of good things about. It's certainly possible. But for this time of year, even knowing that number of ratings and critical mass there is something that's not a perfect apples-to-apples comparison, that is a shocking state of being right now.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the problem that comes about when you don't have conventions running at full capacity, when you don't have as many game nights and folks gathering together, even with restrictions in a lot of ways loosened up. It's just something where the industry as a whole has taken a massive hit. So that's not to say I don't think we're entering the dark ages of games or whatever else, but you're gonna be hard pressed to find a year that was, at least as of right now, as rough as 2021 was in the space of board games. I was stunned to see that, Sean.
Yeah, no, it was pretty crazy. And kind of along those same lines, looking at my personal plays. So 2020, okay, so I track my plays since the beginning of 2020 on Board Game Apps, or Board Game, what is it called? Board Game Stats. There we go. And I did it like 4 years ago for most of a year, then I stopped. But 2020, I started doing it, start of the year. So pretty readily, or pretty reliably, I should say. And so in 2020, I had 160 plays of games. And I don't typically track like plays of Magic or anything like that, because that kind of skews the numbers. So 160 plays. In 2021, I had 86 plays. Half the number of plays. Yeah, big yikes. And I'll tell you what the big difference I think was. So even though there were almost no Dukes of Dice game nights after lockdown in 2020, there was a ton of online plays, a ton, and I tracked those. But that's pretty much died off. Those online plays have pretty much died off. Also, in 2020, my most regular other person that I played with was Raquel Garcia. Raquel and I played 52 games together that year. In 2021, we played 16 games. That's wild. And I've talked before how it became harder and harder for us to get plays of stuff here at the house. In fact, I would say probably more of my and Raquel's plays have probably happened outside of the house. Most of them rather, which is weird. It's certainly weird, and it's not that she doesn't want to play. It's not that I don't want to play with her. It's just gotten, for whatever reason, more difficult. And I will say that part of that reason is likely because a greater portion of my time has been taken up with Warhammer and Pokemon. So that being said, I find it very interesting.
I'm curious if this is a case of publishers not being able to put out as much stuff, or just simply put, because of fewer overall plays, less folks at conventions, less of that kind of enthusiasm, that has had a pretty significant effect. I don't work inside of a publisher anymore. I don't know for sure what those numbers actually would look like if I were back at Gray Fox. and whether this would be a really big struggle at this point. I'm not sure. But I do know anecdotally, as we've looked at games to review for the show, it's been harder and harder to find something that makes any degree of sense to review for the show.
Yeah.
And that's unusual. Even in 2020, that part was tricky. I will agree with you on the online play piece of this, Sean. I, even in 2020, had started getting burned out on online plays of games. It has fallen off a complete cliff in 2021. It's just not something that I'm interested in. I want to play games in person with other people. That's why I'm in this hobby. And that's not to say if you get enjoyment from playing tabletop games online, more power to you. It's a great way to stay safe during these tricky times. It's a great way to play test efficiently from great distances, stay connected to folks, but it's just not why I'm in the hobby. And so it's tough. And I would say, Sean, that this kind of dovetails perfectly into the biggest gaming change from 2021, which I think is just, for me, it was feeling more disconnected from the hobby, especially towards the end of the year, compared to how I would typically feel. So that, to me, is the biggest gaming change, and already kind of talked about it to death. The other thing I would throw in there is, I guess, having the ability to paint and get a little more into that miniature space would be the other biggest gaming change piece of the equation for me. But that's the biggest one, and it's a little bit of a sad one for me. And I hope 2022 is better. I hope I can get to a convention and reconnect in that way. But of course, with little below 3-month-old baby girl, who knows if that's going to happen or not? I'm not sure. So, that's my biggest gaming change. I actually think yours hasn't exactly been mentioned, though. There's a little hint you gave to it, if I had to guess.
And it's I must have tuned you out or something, because I didn't realize. I thought this was more of like an introduction to the year.
It was, but then it morphed into. I realized it covered my thoughts on that category. Fair
enough. Yeah, no, I think the big gaming change for me has been Chewy as a gaming partner. So I mean, there were plenty of kid stuff that we did in 2020 and the years before, but now she is more interested in playing non-kids games. There's still, a big limit in terms of what we can do. She's not going to be playing 18xx games with me anytime soon, but there's a lot of stuff that has opened up and that she has enjoyed. Just watching her grow in her ability to read and comprehend has been amazing, and was a huge difference. And then the biggest thing there is with Pokemon. And I one thing I'll say though about that here in a second, but I mean, she is super into Pokemon now in terms of the IP, and then in terms of the card game. Just watching like this like young little female Sean like getting into collectible card games and playing at stores and sleeving up cards and thinking, oh, would this be a good card for the deck, and having fun opening packs and it's just super cool. It's very cool. This is something where Raquel very early on was like, I love board games, but like any types of these collectible card games or living card games, just not her thing. Like she's readily admitted there's like too much of an investment, I guess, in terms of learning about everything that's out there. Because it's not just enough to like know what's in your deck. You need to know about all of these other cards, what this other person could play, what's likely to happen, certain lines of play. And with Chewy, she's not quite there yet, right? But I didn't start playing CCGs until I was in the 7th grade, I think. And here she is in 1st grade playing the Pokemon TCG, and she's having a blast. I mean, we've gone every Sunday for the last 6 weeks now for at least a couple hours. So she's having a blast, and I'm having a blast kind of exploring it with her. And we've talked about it a lot, so I don't think it's a big surprise that that's been my biggest gaming change. But also, you can kind of throw in there, it was February of this year too, that I really started getting back into Warhammer and painting and things like that, which has definitely eaten into the board game time. So those two things kind of together definitely are a pretty significant change.
The Geek echoed your thoughts on delighting in their children getting more into playing games. That was the most common thread. The one exception to that, Matthew S. mentioned having a new heavy gaming buddy, which has dramatically increased that gaming. But as an example, pulling up the guild now, Kyle Kelly mentioned both his 4-year-old daughter developing a love for games, and then his 10-year-old son getting into more advanced games, which is awesome to see. Sylvain Lacroix mentioned his 9-year-old daughter stepping up her level, and 7-year-old son starting to get into games. This also was something that Andrea Merrihew mentioned. So this is it continues to be it's something that I'm very excited about in the future. I know it's not anytime soon for me, but I'm hoping that that Ruby can be a little gaming buddy for me in the future. I'll try not to force it, but hopefully she'll be into it.
And what I'll say, one of the things that I've noticed that Chewy hasn't done yet, and I don't know if it's a factor of age or what, it's definitely not a personality thing, because both Raquel and I are pretty obsessive people. What Chewy hasn't done is she hasn't really started like spending so much of her free time going through all of the cards that we've acquired and like reading stuff online. Not that there was really an online when I was playing Magic initially, but like I was buying magazines. I was doing like, there was all this stuff that I just sort of immersed myself in. And I still do, like when I started playing Netrunner a lot and we started having Netrunner LCG tournaments, like there's just this sort of obsessiveness that happens. I haven't seen that yet. So like, she's very excited if we're going to play a game of Pokemon during the week. She's very excited when we go to the Tavern of Souls on Sundays, but like otherwise she's not like obsessing over it, which that's probably, maybe that's a good thing. And maybe I should be thankful for that. But I just found that interesting, because definitely that's part of her personality. And so I'm just kind of curious. I'm wondering like if she knows that she doesn't need to, because I'll do it. I was joking with the owners at Tavern of Souls. I'm like, she's never going to like really understand like the grind of being like a young, poor card game player. Like I remember being in, not first grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, high school, and just like doing the best I could to cobble stuff together. Like she's never going to have to face that, because her dad's just going to, So I don't know. I don't know if I'm like a crutch or if it's a factor of age or what, but I find it interesting. It's an interesting little observation, and I'm curious to see if that's going to change. I've
been really happy to see that. It's been something cool to hear about. Yeah. Just having, again, we've talked about kind of tying Chewy to the start of this show, but how long this show has been around, that we now have someone who, at some point, I feel like you got to do a kids review with Chewy.
Oh yeah. Yeah. She would definitely love to do that. That might be something we can do.
I think that would be the best. That would be the first episode of the Dukes of Dice in a long time that I would have listened to. So,
okay.
All right. Let's move on, Sean. And I think sticking in this theme of maybe falling back more on the familiar with games from 2020, games in 2021, and not playing new releases from 2021. We'll get to the new releases later on, but my most played game of 2021 was something that I rediscovered after my grandmother passed away. And I had played this game from time to time. This is not in the typical board game space, right? But it would not be accurate to mention any other game in this spot. Effectively, my grandma Bird, who passed away this past year, had taught me cribbage from a pretty young age. Right. And this was something we would all play out at Cape Cod. She was an adamant card player, loved playing cards. And so when she passed away, in her as a way of kind of honoring and remembering her, I purchased a very nice cribbage board for Abby and I to play with. Well, Abby has loved this game, has gotten really into it, and it is not uncommon for us to play a whole bunch of 3-game sets of this. I mean, we were playing this game right before Ruby was born. That was the last game right before then. We've been playing a lot of 3-game sets. We're going to be actively tracking those. Abby wants to put up a little scoreboard somewhere in the living room just to kind of keep an eye on the series. Yeah, look, Cribbage, for folks who don't know, it's a game you can play with a standard deck of 52 cards. It plays well as a 2 or 3 player game. There's some strategy to it, right? There's some things you can learn. But it's not the deepest game of all time, and there's certainly a lot of luck of what you get dealt and how things come about that way. So we've really enjoyed it. In fact, we were in the middle of a 3-game set right before we went up to record, and that was easily, by a large factor, the most played game I had this past year. The only other thing that maybe came close, I will talk about a little bit later on. But as far as a game, that was the most played game for me, Cribbage. Sean, over to you.
Yeah. All right. So I've got the stats here. And so I guess the question is, are we talking about in terms of amount of time, in terms of strict number of plays? And then there's kind of another wrinkle that I'll mention here. So for example, in terms of hours, the thing that I've probably played the most of is Warhammer 40K. So, okay, cool. In terms of the strictly speaking most played board game, but just by count, would be Hadrian's Wall. Played a ton of Hadrian's Wall.
Wow. Okay.
And then if we were just to talk about sheer number of plays of any type of game, it would probably be the Pokemon TCG, which is pretty wild, considering that we've only been doing it for about 2 months or so. But I'm going to give you a different answer altogether. And it's going to be a category of games, which is 18xx. I have played a ton of 18xx games. I have played 1, 2, 3, 4, I think six different 18xx games, 5 or 6 this year. And if I added all of them together, they would actually be my most played board game. I mean, there's very, very much a shared rule and design DNA there, just with differences in map and how companies are managed and how they're acquired and things like that. There a lot of these 18xx games, they give you the full rules, but they also give you this kind of single sheet that's like, okay, here's what's different about this game than other 18xx games. And it often allows kind of an easy point of entry for a lot of people. Although I say that really, our buddy Matt has been doing all the heavy lifting with organizing and setting or reading the rules and setting up and things like that. So I may just be oversimplifying that. But I mean, we do this about every 3 weeks, Sunday mornings. Yeah, I've been loving these 18xx games. They're a ton of fun. I could have talked about a new one, 18CZ, that we played last Thursday on the week off. But anyway, yeah, 18xx is probably the one I would say is kind of the quote unquote most played, depending on which metric you want to go by.
All right, fair enough. Cool. Let's move up one more notch. Again, this may involve things that weren't released in 2021, but best gaming experience. Sean, go ahead and go first on this one.
Oh, that's right. I totally blanked for a second there. No, it was SeanCon 2021. It was, we took 2020 off, but SeanCon 2021 was just an awesome experience. I cannot use SeanCons as future best gaming experiences because that's kind of a cop out. But after the year off, it just felt great. It felt great. I'd only done a couple occasional Duke's Dice Wednesday nights. Right now, Empire does them every other Wednesday. And very early on, I was still a little uncomfortable and I had only attended a handful, even though, it's technically my night. But SeanCon 2021 kind of felt like really getting back, still trying to be as safe as possible, obviously. Still masked up and everything, but it was awesome. It was awesome to have buddies come out, to have the local crew come play a bunch of games and have a nice dinner. And we rented out a theater for Black Widow and it was just an awesome experience. It's a fun vacation for me, kind of, even though I'm here. Like we rent a hotel room, and a bunch of us are in this hotel together. We were in the pool, and it was just a ton of fun. And it's one of those mini cons, and kind of gave a taste of that. I had all those hearings though. I had 2 hearings that lasted multiple days. Man, I remember I told the hearing officer on the first day, I'm like, well, just so you know, I'm on vacation. And she's like, well, I need you to come back tomorrow, over the phone, obviously. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, yeah, we'll keep it short because I know you're on vacation. And I'm just like, great, thanks, hearing officer. But no, it was a lot of fun. We had a ton of fun. Great to have Mitch, Ellie, and their spouses come out. Andy didn't come out, but he had his excuses, which weren't valid, but that's fine. But it was a ton of fun. So Sean Con 2021 was my best gaming experience. I thought for a second I completely forgot to pick something.
That would have been bad.
Yeah. I was like, wait, was I supposed to say that playing with Chewie was my best gaming experience of 2021? And then what was I going to say for never mind. We're good. I just completely blanked. I don't have it written down. So that's the problem.
Chewie's going to be very offended listening to this. Just saying.
Okay. I don't think so. I think she'll be fine.
All right. I had 2 that came to mind. This one could have gone under most played game, and it would certainly be the most played hobby game for me, which was buying a copy of, finally able to secure a copy of, and playing an entire campaign of The King's Dilemma.
Oh, yeah.
As a gaming experience, and if we had the category of best new to me game, this would absolutely ace that. An amazing story, lots of memorable moments, a tremendous time, played it out over the course of several weeks. Loved the group, loved the experience, had a ton of fun, ended up winning the whole thing, but really it was the friends we made along the way that were really the most important.
Sure.
So that was the most played hobby game because we played, I think it takes 15 to 18 games to get through a campaign. Tremendous, loved it. That was up there for best gaming experience. But if I think of singular gaming experience, the one for me is The Price is Right, featuring your moderator, Chris, which we did for my birthday. And this is a game show experience where it's run by the former host of Flip the Table, Chris Michaud, or you're also known as your moderator, Chris. It was amazing. It was everything I wanted it to be, a nice 2-hour experience with a bunch of friends from different corners of my life. Hilarious. Folks, I think, tended to think this was better than they were expecting it to be, more engaging than they were expecting it to be. Chris does an amazing job. Per Twitter, he has been working on a new version of the game, new intros and cutscenes in between, and as soon as that's ready to go, it's very possible, given the nature of everything, that a repeat of that for my birthday this year could be a thing. So hopefully that's ready to go. But in any case, that was my top gaming experience of the year. An incredibly well-run event, and one that when it's back up and going, if you see Chris mention it on Twitter, you should absolutely book a slot. It was amazing.
Who won that night?
Ooh, I don't think it was me. Was it you?
Yeah, it was me.
Oh, okay. Good job.
You don't remember? You don't remember?
I don't remember. No, I don't remember.
Yeah, I won that.
Congrats.
Good stuff.
Good work.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. So that is my top gaming experience of 2021. Okay, Sean. Now we're finally into categories that will reference games actually released in 2021. Wild, right? Pretty crazy. Crazy. Let's start off with the most enduring game from 2021. Some of this is based on our own enjoyment. Some of this is just based on predictions for the hobby. What game is likeliest to stick around from the crop of games that were released in 2021? And as mentioned at the top, not the easiest one to come up with, given the release slate being one of the at least lowest regarded in quite some time. Sean, were you able to come up with one for this?
Yeah, I was. And this is one that I haven't technically played.
Oh.
It's from Fantasy Flight Games. It's, let's see, designed by Tony Fanchi and Corey Kineska. It is Unfathomable, which is a reskin, an update, reimplementation of Battlestar Galactica, the board game, which is a game that we've both played quite a bit. A game that I have enjoyed quite a bit, although I haven't played it in years and years and years. My understanding is obviously there's something with the licensing, the IP, BGG or BSG, excuse me, Battlestar Galactica. They probably had some difficulties renewing the rights, or it was just cost prohibitive to do that. And they've got this, they've got their whole little Lovecraft universe, over half a dozen or more different games that they've got. There's no intellectual property issues there, because I think Lovecraft is fully public domain, I think, at this point. I'm pretty sure. So this is a reskin of that, where you're on this like ocean liner cruise, and instead of having these Cylon fighters, you've got these little monsters that come at you, and instead of having the big Cylon base stars, you've got these bigger Cthulhu-ish monsters coming at you. Haven't played it. Our buddy, I know Matt, picked up a copy. It's something I'd certainly be willing to play. I mean, I like BSG a lot. It's got that hidden trader mechanic, and but I believe that with all of the success that BSG, the board game, had, I think that this is something that's going to become an evergreen title for Fantasy Flight games for a good while. I think it's you've got a ton of buy-in to that whole Lovecraft universe that they've kind of already built up. A great system that's kind of already tried and true. I looked at a bunch of the other games from 2021. Maybe Ankh could have some staying power. Possibly Terraforming Mars, Ares Expedition. I don't know enough about it. I haven't played it. But I think Unfathomable's a good pick here. So,
okay. I didn't know much about it, so that was actually informative. I'm curious to see how different it is, and whether it improves some of the things from Battlestar Galactica, because it was that was an experience I really enjoyed way back when, but maybe would feel a little bit dated in some ways now. So I'm curious how the reskin has gone with that. Sean, my pick is going to be on the lighter end, because the truth of the matter is, although there are games that might get a higher rating, if I look back to 2015, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 games in the top 100, but also 12 games ranked ahead of what was truly the most enduring title from that year. That was a year that you had Blood Rage, The Gallerist, Viticulture Essential Edition, Seven Wonders Duel, Through the Ages, Pandemic Legacy Season 1, Voyages of Marco Polo, but the true most enduring game from that year was Codenames.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you need to have something that has an amount of accessibility to it if it's going to really be enduring. And I can imagine when conventions get back up and running again, there are going to be more and more people who are going to discover and really particularly enjoy So Clover. This is a game from Repos Productions. I've talked about it on the show before. This was one that was very popular over the holidays with my family. Basically, it's in many ways Codenames, but more puzzly and cooperative. In that you have these cards with words on them, you'll arrange them, you'll write a word joining them, you'll take the cards away, add a card that wasn't part of that mix, and then everyone else has to try and figure out how those words all lined up together. This is one that when I've played it with folks, they have tended to buy. Similar to Just One, also made by Repos. This is one that I think could have some legs to it and be the enduring, more casual game from 2021. It's much like a lot of those kinds of games, not particularly highly. It's not terribly rated. It's 7.6, fewer than 1,000 ratings. I think should convention season ramp back up in 2022, which I won't make any predictions on that, I think this one could gain a lot more traction fast. So there you go.
Cool.
That's my pick for most enduring. So Clover, much more on the lighter side of things compared to Unfathomable. All right, 2 more categories left, Sean. Biggest surprise or disappointment?
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
Do you want to take this one first, or do you want me to take this
I'll
one
take this
first?
one first.
Okay.
So, all right. You have a successful game, successful board game. Great, terrific, way to go. Sometimes it's lightning in a bottle. And then the publisher or the designer or whoever says, you know what, let's take this successful game and let's slap on the card game, or let's slap on the dice game. And more often than not, they're okay. They're fine. Sometimes they're like, oh, that's pretty good. Very rarely are they better than the original. Very rare. I would almost venture to say I can't think of one that is better than the original. But I would say most don't even come close to being as good as the original. So I'm talking about Baseball Highlights, the dice game.
You have my attention, sir.
I'm sure I do. I was like, oh, cool. That'll be fun. I want to support Mike. It's got Faux Diamonds on the Kickstarter too. Like, sure. Absolutely. Like, it'll be fine. It'll be fun. It'll be okay. Like, it'll be fine. You know, like Mike is just some okay designer. But I got to tell you, this was the first game that we played on New Year's Day. Everyone, many people are aware of Raquel's time management issues. So we got to Rory and Marie's on New Year's Day. It was just me, Mariah, and Shuey, and then Raquel was going to Uber in, but that became problematic in and of itself. But anyway, so at first, in fact, Rory wasn't even there yet. So it was just me and Mariah. Marie and Shuey were playing on Shuey's Switch because we hooked it up to their TV. And I'm like, hey, Mariah, do you want to play Baseball Highlights, the dice game? She's like, yeah, sure. So I started kind of muddling through the rules. I'm reading the rule book, and I'm like, okay. And her eyes were starting to glaze over because I'm just kind of reading the rules. You know, it's that kind of teach. And I'm like, oh, she's not going to enjoy this. And then Rory comes in about halfway through. And by this point, they started like chit-chatting a little bit, and I could just like read the rules to myself and process them real quick. I'm like, okay, I think I got this. Then I explained to both of them how to play. And Rory loved it. Mariah liked it quite a bit. I'm not going to say she loved it, but she liked it quite a bit. I loved it. So much so that we played 3 full games of this.
Wow.
And Rory was like, let's play a 4th. I'm like, no, we can't play a 4th. Marie's going to kill you if we play a 4th because there's things that she wants to do. But this was really good. So never talked about on the show before, because these are my first plays. You haven't played yours. So there is a shared board that is basically a baseball diamond. There's a home plate, first base, second base, third base, where you can have your player color individual runner cubes. So kind of similar to original Baseball Highlights. But this plays multiple players too at the same time. I know you can do multiple players in Baseball Highlights, but you know what I'm saying. More than 3, and it kind of makes, or more than 2, and it still kind of makes sense. And so you have, I think it's 10 dice, and they're 6-sided dice, and there is a single, a double, a triple side. There's a home run side. There is a stolen base side, and there is a walk side. And so you're going to roll all of those, and then you're going to take like dice and put them on that shared diamond on the different areas there. So it keeps the dice, and it keeps your runner cubes once they get on base. And then you each have your own sheet. So it's a roll and write, basically. You each have your own sheet, and for each of those 6 things, there is a row. And as you take dice, you're going to be filling in those rows from left to right. And as you fill in certain spaces, there are bonus actions that will occur, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Now, in addition, there's also a track for power dice, which are additional dice that you can gain access to have more choice. And then there's also the clutch hits track, which is another bonus action on top of it. So what you're trying to do on your turn is you roll these 10 dice, they go out onto the diamond, and then as the active player, you select one group of dice of all the same face, right? So there might be 4 doubles out there. There might be 2 singles. And so it's not going to be just take the most every time, because there is a very important sequencing here because I'm getting super ahead of myself. God, this game is really good. I want to play it right now. And Alex, you should play it this weekend.
Okay.
Do what you can to play it this weekend. There's a solo mode. I haven't played it solo yet, but I'm gonna try it solo. So when you take all the dice, let's say I took 2 singles. Great. I pull those off the diamond, and then I mark off the first 2 single boxes. Usually the first like 1 or 2 are blank, nothing happens. But then usually on like the singles, there will eventually be a single bonus, which is what actually puts a runner on base. So I mark off the second or the third box, whatever it is, and now I have a runner on first. Cool. Now the other 2 players, the non-active players, they get to check off 2 boxes. They need to be in different columns, and there needs to be available dice out on the diamond. But they don't take the dice out. They just need to be available. So that's what you do: active, non-active. And then at the end of a round, you also have to assess the pitcher's dice. I didn't mention the pitcher's dice, but there's a red pitcher's dice that is either going to be throw out the lead runner, double play, throw out the 2 lead runners, triple play, throw out all the runners, or there could be nothing, or there can be a stolen base, which is basically just advance all the runners 1 space for everybody, active and non-active players alike. And so as you're making your choices, you have to be aware of what's going to happen at the end of this particular turn, because it's like, oh, great, I loaded up the bases, but it's a triple play. Whoops, that was dumb of me. So you have to worry about that. Now, additionally, some of the actions are these like bonus actions where as long as you are checking this box off as the last thing you do, you get to use this bonus action. And it's basically a 2 times single or a 2 times double or a 2 times triple. But if you mark over it and it's not your last box that you're checking, it's blank. It does absolutely nothing for you. And so you may have, the other bonuses you might get too are you cross off one of your single boxes and it says, okay, now cross off a double box. And so there's this interesting chaining of, okay, what's the best way for me to do this? I want to make sure that these double actions I'm able to benefit from. I really don't want to put people on base, but the only options I have are to put people on base. Is there something else I can do that at least kind of sets me up better for later? And I will say this too. This has a similar problem to baseball highlights, where if you don't understand just the basic rule fundamentals of baseball in terms of base advancement, it's a little bit harder for people to pick up on. Mariah doesn't have that background. Even Rory didn't have that background. And so explaining to them the difference between a walk and a single, there's a little bit of rules overhead there. Whereas if you know baseball, you don't need that. This was awesome. This was super good. It is probably one of the best roll and writes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Better than Gon's, like Gon's Shown Clever or Welcome 2 is not really a roll and write, but
it's in the same family.
In that same vein.
Yeah, it's in that same family. So I think Gone Shown Clever is more accessible. But again, here you're not just filling in these boxes and scoring points. You're having it's kind of like the difference between Dominion and Clank, right? You're doing this roll and write to push your runners around the bases. So there's like that extra step there. I don't want to say it's the best roll and write, but I give it another couple months and I could be in that position.
Wow.
Legitimately. This was awesome. Now, what you don't have you don't have the deck building. You don't have, obviously, you don't have, you lose a lot of the theme of Baseball Highlights 2045 because there's no accounting for robots and humans and cyborgs. That's not there. So, okay, that's fine. I mean, again, it's a stripped down, reduced version of another game. And so I think a lot of the theme, like this very much could just be a baseball dice game. It's really
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, it's really not a Baseball Highlights 2045. But that's okay because it's really good. Really, really good. I'm excited to bring this around on Duke's Night. I think, we've got a lot of baseball highlights fans out there, and I think it's going to be enjoyed quite a bit. Huge surprise.
I played this as a prototype.
Yeah.
In advance of the Kickstarter, and we talked about it a little bit, and it was good. It still needed some tweaks to it. I heard one of them. One of the things you mentioned absolutely sounds like a tweak from my understanding of the rules previously. And so I'm excited to see how that plays into some of the timing and finesse of the game. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like the same core game, but maybe executed in ways that will have it be more enjoyable. Okay, it's on my table. I have it. I know where it is in my house. So.
Yeah. Oh, and I forgot to mention the clutch hits. It's just another kind of like extra bonus thing, kind of like Gons, right? Where there's all this.
Sure.
It was really good. And here's what I'll say too. Again, take everything, with a grain of salt because of our existing relationship with Mike. But I've played prototypes of Mike's before. I've played another attempt at the dice game of something of his, and I don't know. I don't think I should be able to say what it is. But I was just like, I don't know, Mike. Like. Yeah, it's okay. This was fantastic, really and truly, fantastic.
Okay, I will report back next episode. I will have gotten a play of this in by next episode.
Cool.
So
very cool.
Very cool. Sean, I thought when you were first starting to talk about this, I had forgotten you had mentioned Baseball Highlights, the dice game, as a thing, and I thought we had the same pick for biggest surprise or disappointment, and we don't. Because you were talking about a publisher having success with a title and then coming up with a successor or another game in the line and folks getting excited about it, but it rarely lives up to it. I thought you were referring to my biggest disappointment of 2021, which was Oath. Chronicles of Empire and Exile.
Mm-hmm.
This is based same publisher as Root, same kind of art and look as Root, and I did not remotely expect to hate that game as much as I did. I mean, to the point of unabashedly angry at that game. And look, the majority of folks who've played it have given it a decent score. It's rocking an 8.0 on BGG, on 2.8 thousand ratings. It's doing just fine. I think it's sold enough copies. But if you look on some of the reviews there, it is a polarizing game. And both of us found ourselves squarely on the negative side of that. I was expecting to like Oath. That was the one we played as with the intent of having it be a campaign after the King's Dilemma. And it lasted 2 games. And yikes. Yeah. Yikes, was that bad. I think that was one I think folks would have, maybe been talking about for Game of the Year. And I'm sure for a lot of people it is their Game of the Year. But for me, without going into as many details or as much depth as you did on the positive side, that one was shocking how negative I found that. Because mine was so short, we'll go to the guild here for a little bit. BJ from Board Game Gumbo mentioned Magnate the First City. Thought this would be just another city builder, but found out it was going to be so much, much more. Was close to his Game of the Year. I have not heard a ton about it, I don't think. So that one looks interesting. Most surprising for Francois Miley was 300 Earth and Water, a small box game about the Greco-Persian War. Describes it as card-driven game mixed with a light war game in what was effectively a micro game in a lot of ways. Said it was quick, very engaging, asymmetrical, really easy to teach, and really, really refreshing. I have not heard anything about this. That looks...
What's it called again?
It's called 300 Earth and Water.
Well, that sounds right up my alley.
It sounds absolutely right up your alley. Sylvain Lacroix came up with a positive and a negative. Positive, So Clover, saying that this was a party game that made top 10 of the year for him. On the negative side, Cora, so much potential, great production, but major flaws. And yeah, that was one that we also were not the biggest fans of.
Wait, what?
Sean,
what?
Cora, Khor. Oh, never mind.
We?
No, sorry. Sorry, not we. I 100% agreed.
Cora may come up a little bit later.
Oh, boy. Oh, it shouldn't. It shouldn't, though, Sean. If it does, okay. I will say on the positive side for myself, I had Under Falling Skies. I'm not usually a big solo game. I don't know if that one was released technically in 2021, but whatever. And then Zombie Teens may or may not have been a 2021 release. Those were both games I enjoyed far more than I expected to. So, all right. Game of the year. And I guess Core is in the mix for Sean, which maybe is more of an indictment on 2021 than anything else. If that's in the mix for your game of the year, Sean. Do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
You go first so I can get a copy of Ares Games 300 Earth and Water.
Okay. So, Sean, I had 3 contenders that came to mind for game of the year. The Crew, Mission Deep Sea, which I mentioned earlier in this show. I love The Crew already, and this was an improvement on The Crew. So it maybe struck me or hit me too late in the year to really be the true game of the year for me, but this was one that was a clear runner-up. And Cubitos. We talked a lot about Cubitos earlier in the year. Dice building race game that I enjoyed far, far more than I thought I was going to, and I think could very well have been the pick, if not for this other game. My game of the year pick probably would have been Abby's pick as well. And this is Cascadia. Cascadia from Flat Out Games, designed by Randy Flynn, art by Beth Sobel. I had backed this one on Kickstarter. Flat Out Games has started to build a reputation for cozy, puzzly games as games within their wheelhouse. I'm very excited for Verdant, back to the Kickstarter for that one as well. In Cascadia, you have a group of tiles that are paired with cards. The tiles have both possible habitats for animals, as well as different terrain types, up to a couple of different possible terrain types. That's paired, not with a card, but with an animal disc of different kinds. You have to grab them as a pair, unless you're using a Pinecone token to grab a different matched pair. You'll grab the tile, grab the token, put the token on a matching habitat, add the tile somewhere onto your board. The tiles will score for largest group of a type, and the animals will score based on changing criteria. Simple, puzzly, and I would say my favorite game of 2021. Really had a lot of fun anytime I brought this one to the table. New players, experienced players. It's just a really elegant system that works and makes for a good experience. So really enjoyed Cascadia. It's actually currently on loan to a friend of mine from hockey, and I need to get that one back because I got to get back to the table sometime soon. So that's my pick for Game of the Year 2021. But I will say, Sean, not as enthusiastic about my Game of the Year, perhaps, as I would be in a typical year. So over to you, Sean. What about you?
Yeah, so my favorite game of 2021 is Korra, Rise of an Empire.
Brutal pick.
No, it's not. It's not. I just wanted to see like the vein in your head pop out a little bit.
Oh, it did a little bit, and I did think you were sort of serious for a half second.
Well, the reality is I still really enjoy the game. There was an opportunity to play it a couple weeks ago. I'm trying to remember, and it didn't happen, but I certainly would have wanted to. I own the game still. Anyway, my actual game of the year is Hadrian's Wall. I like this game just a lot. It's another quote unquote roll and write, although I don't really consider it a roll and write because there's a lot more resource management than in a typical roll and write. There's all these, all of these different workers and resources and components, right? A lot more components than in the majority of roll and writes. So this is designed by Bobby Hill from King of the Hill, which is my headcanon. Like I like that. I like that a lot. Damn it, Bobby. Who was this? Was this Renegade? This was Renegade, wasn't it? Garfield Games.
Yeah, Garfield published in the U.S. by Renegade.
By Renegade, right. So yeah, this was a featured review that we did, and I think you liked this pretty well, right?
Yeah, I gave this. I think I gave it a 5, and would stand by that.
I think I gave it a 5.2, if I remember. And there's a good chance if I didn't give it a 6, that it will very likely go up to a 6 at the double take. I like this game quite a bit. And it's something that Raquel and I just played a couple weeks ago. And I think we reviewed it, 6 months ago, 9 months ago? Around the time of Sean Con. So yeah, about 6 months ago. So that's always a good sign, right? When I first played it, they had sold out. It had been sold out. And then Empire got a copy. It finally came back into production, a month or two ago. Picked it up. Raquel played it. Really enjoyed it. So this is, you're building Hadrian's Wall in Roman Britannia, and there's some card flipping that tells you what resources you get. You're using these resources to check boxes off. When you check a box off, it gives you some sort of bonus, and there's all this is the craziest rules teach. That's probably the thing that holds this game back the most, is you're just like, okay, now I'm going to explain to you how the gladiators work. Okay, now I'm going to explain to you how the market works. Now it's a crazy rules teach. And I dislike teaching this game, but it's fun to play. It's a great game. I think I'm probably more enthusiastic about my game of the year than you are about your game of the year. But this is one where I would probably even say, hey, Raquel, do you want to play this, this weekend? Because it's good. It's really, really good. And hopefully it's still in stock right now. And if you missed out early on when it first came out, it's definitely worth taking a look at. And so here's what I would say. If this is considered a roll and write, then I think it's better than Baseball Highlights, the dice game. But I don't think it's a roll and write.
It feels similar in a lot of ways, but it also doesn't, because it's, I don't know. It's tough.
I feel like with a lot of, or even if it's technically a flip and write, right? Because there's no dice. So I definitely lump in flip and writes and roll and writes together in my mind. But there's just something that kind of sets this apart, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get it.
So.
I totally get it. I really like that game as well, and another one for at least slight surprise, as better than I thought it was going to be. From having gone through the rules to the actual play experience, was one that I enjoyed more, and even Abby enjoyed more than I think she thought she was going to. So
yeah.
All right. Well, that's the year that was. Kind of feels a little bit sad to me, 2021, which is shocking, because I look at 2020 and the top end games are reflective of what a typical year would look like. And 2021 is very much not that. So I'm hopeful 2022 is better. It's a very low bar compared to 2021 as far as top end releases. So, all right, before we wrap this up, not the podcast, but this segment, the best picks from the Guild for 2021, the best published in 2021 game for Matthew S., Imperial Steam. BJ from Board Game Gumbo picked Sleeping Gods, which looks really intriguing to me. That's a top 200 game on BGG. Let's see. Best game for Francois Miley, PAX Renaissance 2nd Edition. Best game for Kyle Kelly was Arc Nova. He sees that one as also his most enduring game, saying it has a similar staying power to Terraforming Mars. As mentioned at the kind of top of this, that's one I have my eye on, because I've been hearing enough buzz about that one to want to try it. Sylvain Lacroix picked Terraforming Mars Area Expedition as favorite so far.
Ares.
What did I say? Area? Oh, yeah. Well, because Sylvain wrote Area. All right, Ares Expedition. My mistake. Sorry. In any case, a chance that some things will emerge as enduring classics. Arc Nova, again, one I have my eye on, but broadly, lackluster year. All right. Best of the rest names for this episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast. Sean, kick us off.
Yeah, BJ from Board Game Gumbo suggested Good Riddance, parenthetical, time of your life.
That's, I think, a good descriptor for 2021. And also a great song from Green Day, which I'm not going to sing. Next up, The Name Father, Steve O'Rourke, came up with Blackjack Flashback. So the flashback referring to our retrospective look, and Blackjack referring to 21 in 2021.
And then Josh Yangur suggested Chocolate Decadence, which is a very deep cut.
Yes, it is.
So I haven't listened to the interview yet. Did that come up? Did that come up at all?
It actually did not at any point come up. And I did not re-ask him the ice cream question. For folks who aren't familiar with this, I would ask towards the end of interviews for Holding Court, as the last question, if you could be any flavor of ice cream, what flavor would you be and why? And Jamey's answer to that was chocolate decadence. So good deep cut from Joshy and Gurr, but did not come up in the interview. So nice reference. Francois Miley suggested Earth, mostly harmless, referencing Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
And then finally, Kyle Kelly, instead of sick and tired, six and tired. Because you're sick and tired of 2021. But we had six superlatives, right? That was the tie-in. Six
categories. Six is kind of a weird key number to the Dukes of Dice. So I think anytime you can work six into one of these retrospectives, it's a decent enough pick. So thanks to everyone who contributed names. And Sean, that's going to do it.
Well, yeah, you're right, Alex. That is going to do it. It's now later on a Saturday than normal. So I'm gonna have to go hurry up and edit this. So yeah, that's gonna do it then for the Dukes of Dice podcast. Thanks again to Matthew S. for the title suggestion. At least it wasn't 2020. This has been your episode 266. Until next time, this is Sean.
And Alex.
And Duke you later, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening to the Dukes of Dice. Today's episode was recorded in the Duchy on January 8th, 2021. Our theme music provided by Carbohydro M from his Prime Legacy album. The Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other great board gaming podcasts, check out DicetowerNetwork.com. And for all ways to the Duchy, go to DukesOfDice.com. Find us on Twitter at Dukes of Dice. Join in conversations on our Board Game Geek Guild. Find us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks to our sponsor, Game Toppers LLC. You can learn all you want to know about Game Toppers at GameToppersLLC.com. Remember, if it's not a showstopper, it's not a Game Topper. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Until then, game on.